What would you do if the very people meant to protect your neighborhood became the ones who tore your life apart? This isn't just a story about HOA policies. This is about power, corruption, and a line that was crossed when they shot my wife's service dog. This dog wasn't just a pet. He was her stability. Her guardian. Her lifeline. You're about to hear a story so shocking, so gut-wrenching, it'll leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about safe communities. Before we dive in, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far this story travels. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it grabs you, because trust me, this story only gets more intense from here. Let's begin. The day started like any other. Sunlight filtered through the living room blinds, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee drifted through our cozy suburban home. My wife, Rachel, was seated by the window, brushing her fingers through Thor's golden fur. Thor, her specially trained German Shepherd service dog, had been her lifeline ever since her spinal injury 2 years ago. We lived in the Oak Ridge gated community, well-manicured lawns, strict rules, and an HOA that took itself a little too seriously. The Homeowners Association president, Harold Greaves, was a retired colonel with a clipboard, binoculars, and what seemed like a personal vendetta against anyone who didn't toe the line exactly. The problem began a few months back when Harold questioned Thor's presence at one of the HOA meetings. That dog, he barked, pointing from across the clubhouse, should be muzzled or out of here. It's a liability. Rachel tried to explain Thor's role, that he was legally registered, fully trained, and had saved her from several medical emergencies. Harold wasn't having it. I don't care if he's the Pope's therapy pet. This is a neighborhood, not a kennel. From that moment on, we noticed things changing. We received citations for made-up violations, our trash can being half an inch outside the fence line, the wind chime being too loud, even Rachel's wheelchair ramp being labeled aesthetic pollution. But the worst came last Thursday. I was returning from a late shift at the hospital. The driveway lights were out, again. Thor wasn't waiting at the door like usual. Rachel greeted me at the entrance, eyes wide and trembling. Something's wrong, she whispered. Thor was gone. We searched for hours. Rachel called out, wheeling frantically through the yard with a flashlight in hand. It wasn't until 1:43 a.m. that we found him. Behind the community tennis courts, Thor lay on his side, breathing shallow, a dark red patch soaking into the grass around him. He had been shot, blood pounded in my ears as I scooped him up. Rachel screamed. My hands were trembling as I drove to the emergency vet. Trying to keep pressure on the wound. Stay with me, boy. Stay, I kept whispering, but I could feel his pulse weakening. The vet confirmed the worst. Thor had been shot at close range with a small caliber weapon. Likely a .22. He'd lost a lot of blood. The bullet had grazed his lung. We left him under intensive care and returned home at sunrise, shattered. By 8 a.m., I was banging on Harold's door. He answered in a robe, sipping coffee like he hadn't just destroyed a part of our family. What is the meaning of this? He grumbled. You tell me. I shouted. Thor was shot last night. Found behind the courts. Bleeding out. You've had it out for him from the start. Harold blinked. A smirk curling at the edge of his lips. Maybe he finally wandered where he didn't belong. I stepped forward, rage boiling. If I find out you had anything to do with this, I swear, is that a threat? Consider it a promise, I snapped before walking away. That night, I reviewed my home security footage. My cameras had been mysteriously disabled, but the neighbor across the street, old Mr. Bishop, had a motion-activated setup. I knocked on his door. I saw the lights flicker last night around 11, he said, figured it was just raccoons. But I've got the tapes. Want a look? We went through the footage frame by frame. Around 11:12 p.m., a tall figure crept along our backyard fence line. Thor's shape followed, ears alert, tail stiff. Seconds later, there was a flash, a muzzle flare, then Thor dropped. The man turned and ran, but his face was briefly caught by the side camera. I paused the video. My stomach dropped. It was Harold. Backed by the footage, I filed a police report the next morning. Officer Delgado seemed genuinely disturbed watching the video. This is enough to press charges, he said, but things didn't go as expected. The HOA board suddenly rallied around Harold. They claimed he was nowhere near the courts that night, even forged a timeline with a phony emergency board meeting. Someone had edited the HOA records. The entire board was covering for him. Rachel was devastated. Thor was still fighting for his life. And I couldn't let this slide. I knew I had to dig deeper. If Harold thought he could hide behind his fake rules, his power trips, and his corrupt board, he was about to learn otherwise, and so, I began documenting everything, every edited timestamp, every shady board decision, and every hostile letter we received. I wasn't just fighting for Thor now. I was fighting for Rachel, for justice, for anyone who'd been stepped on by people who hide behind positions of authority. This wasn't going to be quiet anymore, this was war. I brewed a pot of black coffee and sat at the dining table, surrounded by notes, screenshots, HOA emails, and copies of the neighborhood bylaws. Rachel, still shaken, sat nearby with her phone in one hand and Thor's worn collar in the other. He was still at the veterinary hospital. They said he was stable, for now. They're lying for him, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. I know, I replied. But we're going to expose every one of them. We weren't going to rely on the police alone. If Harold had enough pull to get a whole HOA board to lie, then we needed something bigger, something public. I contacted a lawyer friend from college, David Rivas. He specialized in civil rights and property law and had a serious problem with abuses of power. I forwarded him the video footage, the harassment records, the citations, and Rachel's medical documentation that proved Thor was a federally protected service animal. Within a few hours, he was on the phone. This is bad, David said, but the good kind of bad for us. You've got a civil suit here. ADA violations, malicious intent, trespassing, cruelty to animals. We'll go scorched earth. But I need more than footage, I need motive, pattern, and paper trails. You'll have it, I promised, and so, we began digging. Rachel and I pored over HOA documents. There were patterns, selective enforcement, targeted citations, and board meeting minutes that didn't match timestamps on internal emails. They had forged records before. They were sloppy. Rachel found an internal HOA memo that had accidentally been forwarded to all residents a month ago. It was disguised as an architectural update but contained a rant about unacceptable pets and preserving the visual integrity of Oak Ridge. There was a name at the bottom, Vice President of the Board, Susan Klein. We knew she was Harold's closest ally. I needed to talk to someone on the inside, someone who could turn. That's when I remembered Tina Delgado, a board member who'd only joined 6 months earlier. She was the only one who ever gave Rachel a warm smile. I paid her a visit under the pretense of discussing the upcoming neighborhood safety improvement vote. She was hesitant at first but seemed increasingly uncomfortable the moment I mentioned Thor. You know Harold's not that exactly level-headed, right? She said, I know he shot my wife's service dog, Tina. I have him on video. She blinked. You didn't hear it from me, but there was no emergency meeting that night. The whole thing was made up to cover his tracks. I didn't vote on any resolution. Neither did Mark Simmons. The minutes were forged. I leaned forward. Would you be willing to testify? She hesitated, then gave a slow, shaky nod. With Tina on our side and David building our case, we moved to phase 2, pressure. We posted in the neighborhood forum. Not an accusation. Just a simple question, did anyone see or hear anything suspicious near the tennis courts Thursday night? The post exploded. An elderly resident named Mrs. Florence commented that she'd heard a bang around 11 p.m. Another said their dog had started barking like crazy. Someone else anonymously messaged me with a screenshot. Harold had texted them asking to delete any footage if their cameras caught anything near the courts. Bingo, I sent everything to David. He filed an official civil lawsuit against both Harold and the HOA board for ADA violations, negligence, harassment, and emotional distress. At the same time, Rachel and I recorded a video explaining our story. We didn't name Harold directly. But we made sure the truth was crystal clear. We uploaded it to social media. By sunset, it had gone viral. Our peaceful Oak Ridge suddenly became the center of media attention. News vans rolled through the gates. Reporters stood on the sidewalk, cameras aimed at the community's pristine lawns while residents whispered and watched from behind curtains. That night, Harold showed up on our doorstep. He wasn't alone. 2 HOA board members were with him, flanking him like bodyguards. He held a thick folder of documents in one hand and wore a smug look like he still had everything under control. Take that video down, he said bluntly, or what? I asked, arms folded. you've violated several HOA protocols by making internal matters public. We'll fine you. Possibly foreclose. Rachel wheeled up beside me. You shot my dog. He looked past her like she didn't exist. You're on thin ice already. That was it. I stepped forward, blocking the doorway. I've got news for you, Harold. You're not the law here. You're not untouchable. And when the court date hits, you'll be lucky to walk away with your clipboard, let alone your title. He didn't reply. Just stared with his cold, calculated eyes before turning on his heel and walking away. We received an anonymous letter the next morning, typed and signed, "Be careful. Harold doesn't lose. He destroys." But we weren't backing down, the media storm only grew. Rachel was interviewed on live TV. Thor's story reached national animal rights groups, disability advocates, and veteran organizations. Donations poured in for Thor's medical bills. More importantly, former residents of Oak Ridge started coming forward with horror stories of their own, stories about intimidation, forced evictions, and fines for made-up violations. The facade was cracking, still, we stayed alert. Security cameras were upgraded. We documented every interaction. We made sure the world was watching. Because people like Harold thrived in shadows, and now, the lights were on, but we didn't expect what happened next. Late one night, just past midnight, our power went out. Our security system, now on backup battery, kicked in, but only audio. There was movement outside, a soft click, a door handle being tested, and then, a window shattered. The sound of breaking glass sliced through the silence of the night. I bolted out of bed, adrenaline crashing into my chest like a freight train. Rachel sat up instantly, heart pounding as she reached for the emergency panic button on the nightstand. Thor's empty bed beside ours reminded us of everything we'd already lost, and what more we could lose. The motion-triggered lights outside flickered on. Shadows moved just beyond the curtains. Someone was in our backyard. I grabbed the aluminum bat I kept beneath the bed and crept toward the hallway while Rachel activated the emergency call to 911, "Don't go out there." She whispered fiercely, "I'm not," I said, my voice cold and low. "But if they're coming in," the hallway sensor chirped. I aimed the bat, bracing. But the intruder hadn't made it past the sunroom yet. Glass crunched beneath heavy boots. Seconds later, a blinding white light flooded the house, flashing red and blue soon followed, sirens. Our backup security system had also alerted local patrol. "Just in time, get on the ground." A deputy's voice boomed from the backyard. I flung open the rear door just as a man in dark clothes was being tackled onto the wet grass. A second man bolted, hopping the fence, but was caught by another officer on the other side. I recognized one of them immediately, Mark Simmons, an HOA board member. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered. Rachel wheeled up behind me in her robe, eyes wide. "That's Mark. Why would he brought someone with him?" I looked at the second guy being cuffed. He was wearing a black hoodie, gloves, and a ski mask, clearly planning something more sinister than a surprise visit. The police were just as shocked. They separated both suspects and questioned them on the spot. Mark tried the classic "I was just checking on their property" line, but it collapsed the moment the officers found zip ties, duct tape, and a crowbar in his companion's backpack. Attempted home invasion. With intent to harm, Rachel and I gave our statements, showing them our security footage. The officers took it seriously. And this time, no favors were granted. Mark and his masked friend were hauled off in squad cars, but the damage was done. This wasn't just intimidation anymore, this was war. The next morning, Rachel and I went directly to David, our lawyer. He was livid. They just moved from a civil case to a criminal conspiracy. This is a turning point. We amended our lawsuit immediately, adding charges of attempted burglary, conspiracy to intimidate a witness, and endangerment. And we went back to the media. Rachel, fierce and focused, appeared on another broadcast, detailing the midnight break-in attempt. "Our home isn't safe anymore," she said, steady and strong. "All because of a man who thinks rules make him God. We just wanted peace. Now we want justice." The video hit 2 million views overnight. People began protesting in front of Oak Ridge's gates. News vans lined the entrance. Pet lovers, disability rights groups, and anti-HOA advocates camped out with signs that read things like, "Justice for Thor." HOAs aren't above the law. Protect our veterans and service animals. The pressure on the HOA board was mounting, residents demanded an emergency meeting. An open one this time. The board couldn't dodge it anymore. It was scheduled for that Thursday night in the clubhouse. We came prepared. Rachel and I walked into the packed hall with our heads high. The tension inside was thick. Neighbors sat in tight rows, murmuring anxiously. HOA members, pale and rattled, sat behind a long folding table up front. Harold was there, his eyes burning with restrained rage. David stood beside us, a thick binder under one arm and a wireless mic clipped to his collar. Rachel held Thor's collar around her wrist like a war medal. Harold opened with a weak attempt at control. We've gathered tonight to address concerns raised online and in the media. Please remember to keep your statements respectful and in accordance with HOA by respect. Rachel interrupted. Did you show Thor respect when you shot him? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some clapped. Others leaned forward. Riveted, Harold straightened. That was investigated. It was a misunderstanding. We have proof it was deliberate, David said, stepping forward. And we filed a civil and criminal case against you and this board. For those of you unaware, an HOA board member attempted to break into our home 2 nights ago. He's in custody right now. The room erupted, shouts filled the air. Some residents screamed, others stood demanding explanations. A man in the back yelled, "You brought this to our neighborhood," but was quickly drowned out by chants of disband the board. Harold tried to bang a gavel, but no one listened. His authority was slipping. David raised his voice over the chaos. We're not just fighting for us. We're fighting for every family here who's ever been bullied, silenced, or fined into submission by this corrupt board. Tina Delgado, the lone sympathetic board member, stood and walked around to our side. I resign, she said. And I will testify under oath against Harold and any member of this board who abused their power. Another board member hesitated, then joined her. 2 more stood and walked out entirely. Harold's face turned crimson. This is a circus. These people are lying. Rachel wheeled closer to the microphone. Then prove it. Show them the real meeting minutes. Show them the emails. Show them the vote you supposedly held before Thor was shot. Harold opened his mouth. Then closed it. He had nothing. The crowd smelled blood. Chants began again. Someone shouted, "Arrest him." Another, "Resign now." Harold pushed back from the table, knocking over his chair. "You'll regret this," he muttered, pointing at us. "All of you." He stormed out as cameras captured every second, but we weren't done. After the meeting, a man in a gray hoodie approached us in the parking lot. He looked over his shoulder, then said quietly, "I used to do security IT for the HOA. I quit 2 months ago. If you're going after Harold, you'll want to see this." He handed me a flash drive. "What's on it?" I asked. "His private camera backups," the man replied. Stuff he thought he deleted. Back home, I sat at the edge of my desk, staring at the flash drive like it was a live grenade. Rachel wheeled up beside me, her hand resting gently on my forearm. "Plug it in," she said softly, though there was tension in her voice. "Whatever's on it. We need to see it." I slid the flash drive into my laptop. The screen flickered for a moment, and then folders popped up. Labeled, dated, organized. The former IT guy, Greg, he said his name was, had clearly worked meticulously. One folder caught my attention immediately, Private Archive, HC. I clicked. Inside were dozens of video files. Surveillance footage from the clubhouse, the HOA boardroom, and, disturbingly, what looked like private homes. Rachel's eyes narrowed. He was spying on residents. "Looks like it," I said grimly. We opened a file dated a week before Thor was shot. The feed showed the boardroom. Harold sat at the head of the table, surrounded by the other HOA members. "He's becoming a liability," Harold's voice said clearly. "We warned him about the dog. They all think the animal is some kind of untouchable saint just because it wears a vest. It's a dog. We control this neighborhood, not some mutt and his crippled handler." Rachel inhaled sharply. "You sure the cameras are off?" Another board member asked. Harold chuckled. "Only the ones residents see. This one's just for me." They laughed. He went on. "I've got someone who'll handle it. Nothing drastic, just scare them. But if the dog gets in the way, Another video, from the night Thor was killed, the camera was from a hidden angle, facing our street. We saw the same black truck that sped off the night it happened. Harold was in the passenger seat. "You lying sack of," I hissed, fists tightening. Rachel leaned in, voice cold. "We show this to David. We show this to the cops. Harold's going down." The next morning, we met David at his office and handed him the drive. He watched the footage in silence, jaw tight, eyes dark. "This is bigger than I thought," he said finally. "This isn't just harassment. This is a calculated conspiracy. And the fact that Harold tried to delete this means he knew it." "What's the next move?" I asked. "Federal charges," he replied. "Wire fraud. Civil rights violations. Animal cruelty. And we're pushing for removal of the entire HOA board under state HOA code violations." "Can we get him arrested?" Rachel asked. David nodded. "Yes. And we will." That night, we received a message from Greg. "Careful. Someone saw me talking to you. I think they're watching my place. Be on alert." Rachel and I immediately activated our full security system. Floodlights. Panic alarms. Our friend Mike, a former Marine, came to stay at the house. At 3:17 a.m., the alarm blared. I grabbed my pistol and raced downstairs. Rachel wheeling behind me, Mike was already at the front door, weapon drawn. Outside, someone was running through our yard toward the woods. The motion lights caught just enough of their silhouette. It wasn't Mark or Harold. This guy was younger, slimmer. Rachel pointed at the monitor. "There, see that?" A shadow paused behind the trees, raising something toward the house. Crack, a shot rang out, and the window near the living room shattered. Mike returned fire, 3 quick pops. The figure ducked and vanished. Sirens came seconds later. We were on speed dial with the local PD now. Once again, the footage saved us. The intruder had been casing our house for over an hour. He had gloves, a backpack, and what appeared to be a police scanner. He was trying to disable our alarm system. "This wasn't a robbery," the officer said grimly. "This was an assassination attempt." Rachel clenched her fists. "Thor died protecting me. Now someone wants us both gone." The arrest came at noon. Harold Carter was taken into custody on charges of conspiracy, attempted murder, obstruction of justice, and more. The footage had been irrefutable. His fingerprints were found in Greg's hacked laptop. He had paid 2 men through a shell company to harass and intimidate us. News spread like wildfire. HOA president arrested in shocking dog-killing conspiracy. Service dog shooting sparks federal investigation into rogue HOA board. Veterans family targeted, the nation reacts. Rachel and I received messages from people around the world, veterans. Disabled folks with service animals. Parents whose kids had been harassed by HOAs. People finally felt heard, but we knew it wasn't over. The remaining board members were still trying to cover their tracks. They tried to paint Harold as a rogue leader, disconnected from the board's values, except we had more video. One showed them laughing about issuing bogus citations. Another had them mocking Rachel's disability. At the next emergency board hearing, held via Zoom because the HOA office was under investigation, I logged in and shared the screen. Clip after clip. Their words, their faces, their lies. "You want to claim this was just Harold?" I said. "Explain this footage." The chat blew up. Residents demanded full board removal. Petitions started instantly. One by one, board members resigned under pressure, except for one holdout, Gary Finch, Harold's second-in-command. Gary tried to be slick. Claimed he was never involved in anything. 2 days later, we received a manila envelope on our doorstep. No return address. Inside were photographs. Gary Finch meeting someone in a gas station parking lot, exchanging cash. The envelope also included receipts. Transactions. A burner phone number. Greg had gone deeper than we realized. He hadn't just handed us video files, he had launched an internal espionage campaign. And Gary was the next domino to fall. David filed an emergency motion to freeze Gary's accounts. 2 hours later, Gary vanished. Police issued a warrant. Meanwhile, residents voted unanimously to dissolve the existing HOA. A temporary advisory council was created, and they invited Rachel and me to serve as consultants to help rewrite the bylaws and prevent future abuse of power. It felt like justice was coming. But something still lingered. Gary was out there. And he wasn't going to vanish quietly. 3 days after Gary Finch disappeared, the neighborhood fell into an eerie calm. The temporary HOA board was making swift reforms, residents were empowered, and Harold remained in jail without bond. But the silence around Gary's whereabouts buzzed louder with each passing hour. Everyone knew, when a man like Gary runs, he's not hiding. He's planning. Rachel and I were eating breakfast when the doorbell rang. Mike, always alert, opened it with one hand resting on the grip of his holstered sidearm. A short, gray-haired woman stood outside, nervously clutching a handbag. "I'm sorry to come unannounced," she said. "My name is Ellen Finch. I'm Gary's wife." Rachel wheeled to the door. I followed. "He hasn't come home," she said shakily. "He emptied our accounts, took the passports, and left a note." She handed me a crumpled piece of lined paper. I unfolded it. "Don't try to find me. I didn't sign up to go to prison for this." They all knew. I wasn't the only one. "You'll be safer without me." "He's scared," Ellen whispered. "But he's also dangerous when cornered." We sat her down, got her some tea, and Rachel gently asked, "Did he ever mention what Harold and the others were planning? Anything about the dog?" Ellen looked down at her hands. "He told me Harold was obsessed with control. Said people like you and Rachel were a problem, the kind that needed to be managed. He talked about a plan to provoke Thor into attacking someone, then claiming it was dangerous." Rachel blinked, stunned. "So they were going to manufacture a reason to have Thor removed?" "Yes," Ellen said. "But Gary didn't trust it would work. He said that the cleaner Harold hired would do it his way if things got complicated." I felt a surge of nausea. "That cleaner shot Thor?" Ellen nodded. "Do you know who he is?" I asked. "No name," she replied. "But I remember Gary saying he used to be a cop. One who got fired for excessive force." That was enough for David, our attorney, to pull police records. Within hours, he found a match: Benjamin Reese. Terminated from the force after a lawsuit involving brutality against a disabled veteran. Guess who dropped the charges back then? Harold Carter. He'd been on the police oversight committee at the time. The dots were connecting faster than we could keep up, but Benjamin Reese was also off-grid. No known address. No recent activity. Until that night, around 11:20 p.m., a motion alert triggered from one of our perimeter cameras. Rachel and I rushed to the monitor. There he was, Benjamin, walking along the tree line in a hoodie, peering through binoculars. This time, he wasn't subtle. He wanted us to see him. Mike grabbed his rifle. "I'm going out." "Wait," I said. "We call the cops, get the drone in the air. We're not giving him the chance to vanish again." While Rachel stayed inside with Ellen, I and Mike followed the trail around the side of the house, weapons ready. A whir from the drone buzzed above us as the thermal camera scanned the woods. Then we saw him. Huddled by a tree, Mike shouted, "Freeze!" But Reese bolted. He moved like he'd trained for this, weaving through the shadows. Mike fired a warning shot over his head. Reese ducked but tripped on a root and slammed hard into the base of a tree. We tackled him before he could get up. I ripped the hoodie back. His face was scratched, bleeding, and his eyes burned with rage. "You think you can take down men like me?" He spat. "Thor was a hero," I growled, holding his arms down as Mike zip-tied his wrists. "You shot a service animal protecting my wife." He sneered. "That mutt was just a liability. You all are." Cops arrived 10 minutes later. Reese was taken into custody on charges of animal cruelty, assault, and conspiracy to commit murder. His capture opened up even more files. Phone records. Text messages between him and Harold. And, unexpectedly, between him and Gary. That's when David called us. "You need to see this," he said, voice tight. We met him at his office. He pulled up a text thread between Reese and Gary from 2 days before Thor was killed. Gary, plan still in motion. Reese, on standby. You sure she's gonna be home alone? Gary, yeah. He leaves at 4. She's out with the dog. That's your window. Rachel inhaled slowly. They timed it. They waited until I was alone. David nodded. It's premeditated. They weren't just annoyed by Thor. They wanted him eliminated. That night, the community held a vigil. Hundreds of residents filled the street in front of our home with candles and flowers. Posters of Thor lined the sidewalks, photos of him guiding Rachel, smiling beside kids, playing fetch. I stood at the front with a microphone, Rachel beside me in her chair, hands folded tightly. Thor wasn't just a dog, I said. He was a guardian. A soldier in his own right. And tonight, we don't just honor him. We fight for what he gave his life defending, our dignity, our rights, our safety. The crowd applauded. Some wiping away tears. Rachel spoke next. Her voice didn't waver. I have lived with disability for years, she said. But what disabled me the most wasn't my condition, it was the ignorance and cruelty of people like Harold Carter and Gary Finch. Thor didn't just guide me, he gave me freedom. And they took him away because that scared them. The crowd erupted in cheers and chants of justice for Thor. The next morning, Ellen found something else. She'd gone through Gary's study and discovered a locked drawer. Inside were documents, plans for a land deal. A shady partnership with a private developer. They wanted to evict several homeowners under HOA rule violations to make way for luxury condos. Thor had been the tipping point. The incident was supposed to spark fear, force problem residents out. Now, we had the smoking gun, but Gary still hadn't been found, until, 3 nights later, our phone rang. A voice we didn't recognize said 3 words, "Check your garage." We rushed out. The door was cracked open. Inside, lying on the cold concrete floor, was a man with bruised knuckles, torn clothes, and swollen lips. Gary Finch, unconscious, zip-tied to a chair, pinned to his chest with a knife was a note, "You run, you pay. Everyone answers for what they did to that dog." The garage was dead silent, save for the steady drip of water from a leaking pipe above Gary Finch's limp form. His head was slumped forward, blood dried along his temple, bruises blooming along his jaw. The rope around his chest was tied with military precision, tight, unyielding. Whoever delivered him knew what they were doing. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. "Is he alive?" Mike leaned down and checked his pulse. "Weak, but yeah. Someone roughed him up, but didn't finish the job." David stepped into the garage behind us, his jaw tightening at the sight. "We need to call the police, now. No matter how much of a scumbag he is, this can't turn into street justice." I nodded reluctantly. "Yeah. But not before we get a name." I walked over and slapped Gary lightly across the face. "Hey. Wake up." His eyelids fluttered, and he let out a groan. His lips were cracked. "Wah. What?" "You're home, Gary," I said coldly. "Now tell us who did this to you." His bloodshot eyes darted around the garage, disoriented. "I didn't shoot the dog." "No," Rachel cut in. "But you set it in motion. You laid the tracks for murder." Gary tried to move, but his wrists were bound so tight his hands were going purple. He let out a shaky breath. "I was gonna run. Leave everything behind. But he found me." "Who?" I asked, stepping closer. "Reese," Gary whispered. "After you caught him. His crew came looking for answers. They didn't like that I left loose ends. Said someone needed to take the fall." "Wait," David said. "He had a crew." Gary nodded weakly. "Guys from his old force. A couple were never charged but were forced out. They freelance now. Dirty work. Intimidation, blackmail, evictions." My stomach churned. This went deeper than we thought. "What do they want now?" Rachel asked. "They're scared," Gary muttered. "Said I should make things disappear, burn evidence, leave town. When I said no, well, you see what happened." He coughed, winced, and glanced at Rachel. "I didn't want it to go that far. I swear." "Save it," Rachel snapped. "You stood by while they hunted Thor like prey." Moments later, sirens pierced the air. The police swarmed the property, and paramedics checked Gary before loading him into an ambulance. We handed over the note, the documents Ellen had found, and the photos of the zip ties and bruises. Lieutenant Carver, the lead investigator, pulled me aside. "This Reese crew, if they're really behind this, will need more than hearsay to put them away. They're ghosts. No one talks about them. No one wants to." "I want to," I said firmly. "They picked the wrong dog. The wrong woman. The wrong family. Within the hour, our house became a command center. Carver brought in analysts, tech experts, and 2K9 officers. Meanwhile, Mike secured the perimeter with a private security firm. But Rachel wasn't content waiting inside. She rolled into the makeshift operations room with a map spread across her lap. "You want them?" she said. "You have to think like them." She pointed at the HOA clubhouse on the map. Harold's old office. He kept files off books. Gary mentioned that before he passed out. Carver frowned. "We already searched that place." "Not for what matters," Rachel replied. "Look behind the insulation in the back closet." Harold bragged about hiding things in plain sight. Skeptical but intrigued, Carver sent a team. An hour later, they called us back. Rachel had been right. Behind the insulation, they found a narrow false wall concealing an old filing cabinet filled with documents. Burner phone receipts, cash ledgers, and handwritten notes. On top sat a black flash drive. The files on the drive were damning: names, dates, and detailed plans of surveillance on residents, particularly disabled or minority homeowners. Tactics to provoke them into breaking HOA rules. Footage of Thor being watched. Even emails discussing how to terminate liability before lawsuits could emerge. But the worst part, several photos of Rachel, zoomed in, taken from the woods behind our home. She turned away from the screen, fists clenched. "They stalked me." David scrolled further. "And here, pay stubs. From a private security contractor linked to Reese's crew." "Bingo," Carver muttered. The dominoes began falling fast. Carver got a judge to issue warrants for two of Reese's known associates, Travis Holt and Marcus Breyer. Both were former officers booted from the force for violent conduct. That night, tactical units hit their known safe houses. Holt was found hiding in a basement bunker with a cache of illegal weapons and surveillance gear. He tried to run but was taken down by AK-9. Breyer, on the other hand, wasn't there, but his laptop was, and on it, a spreadsheet detailing every homeowner they were targeting next. With timestamps. Payment records. Rachel's name was at the top of the list. Next to it, final phase scheduled, February 28, 25. That was tomorrow. Mike stormed into the room. "We need eyes on every street. Every alley. Lock this place down now." I looked at Carver. "You said they were ghosts." "Well, ghosts bleed too. We end this tomorrow." That night, none of us slept. Rachel stayed in the living room, her chair by the window, flashlight in one hand, taser in the other. I sat across from her with a shotgun on my lap. Mike and two other security guards patrolled in shifts, eyes on cameras and thermals. At 3:12 a.m., motion alerts went off, again, 2 heat signatures. Perimeter fence. East side, Carver's team was waiting. Spotlights flared on. Voices screamed through bullhorns, "Hands where we can see them. Down on the ground." One suspect bolted into the woods. The other raised his hands, trembling, "Don't shoot. I'm just the lookout. They paid me to warn them." "Names." Carver shouted, "They're going for the files." The drive. Too late. Back at the clubhouse, flames erupted. Someone had set the false wall ablaze, trying to destroy the evidence. But Carver's team was ready. They had fire crews and backup drives of everything already cataloged, and then, our final lead, a dash cam from the fleeing suspect's vehicle, in the footage. Breyer. Wearing body armor. Holding a weapon. Saying one chilling sentence, "Make it look like a robbery. Take the girl out if she resists." By dawn, our quiet neighborhood resembled a battlefield. Police cruisers lined the street. Crime scene tape flapped in the morning wind. The clubhouse smoldered, blackened and charred, yet its secrets survived thanks to the quick work of fire crews and backup drives. Inside our home, Rachel stared at the paused dash cam footage. Breyer's words echoed in the silence, "Make it look like a robbery. Take the girl out if she resists." "Take the girl out," she muttered, voice laced with ice. He wasn't going to stop at Thor. He was coming for me next. Lieutenant Carver stood beside her, jaw tight. "We've issued a bolo for Breyer. Air and ground units are sweeping. It's only a matter of time." "But he's cornered," I said, pacing. "And a guy like that, with nothing to lose, is the most dangerous kind of man. He'll strike before he's caught." Rachel agreed, gripping the armrest of her chair. Especially if he thinks he can silence us permanently. Mike burst through the door then, holding his phone. We got something. Security camera at a gas station 40 minutes north picked up a black Dodge Durango. Matches Breyer's plates. He's heading out of town, fast. David leaned over Mike's shoulder. Wait, he's not leaving. He's looping around. He's circling the rural access roads behind our neighborhood. Rachel's eyes narrowed. He's coming back. Carver's radio squawked. Suspect sighting confirmed. Officers are repositioning near Ridgeview Trail. Suspect is armed and possibly wearing tactical gear. I loaded a magazine into my rifle. You're not doing this without me. Neither am I, Rachel added. Absolutely not, I said. You're staying here. She raised an eyebrow. After everything? After what they did to Thor, to our home, to my peace of mind? You're damn right I'm going. Carver glanced between us. You two are civilians. I'm a former recon scout, I told him. I've done tours in the desert, jungle, and snow. I've tracked people who vanished in plain daylight. Let me do what I do. Carver nodded reluctantly. All right. But you follow my lead. No cowboy stuff. Mike threw me a Kevlar vest. You'll want this. We geared up and rolled out. Our convoy included 3 unmarked SUVs and 1 tactical van. Rachel rode with me, her service pistol tucked under her leg. Her fingers tapped a steady rhythm on her chair's frame, restless, focused. The plan was simple: cut off all escape routes, drive Breyer toward a bottleneck between 2 wooded ridges, and take him alive if possible. But Breyer had other plans. As we crept into position, a loud explosion rocked the trail. One of our lead vehicles swerved off the road and slammed into a tree, ambush. Someone yelled over the radio, smoke billowed. Shots rang out from the ridge. Breyer was dug in. He had set up an improvised position overlooking the road. Carver barked orders. Officers dismounted, returned fire, and fanned out into the woods. Mike slid into the brush beside me. He knew we were coming. He's prepared. Rachel remained in her chair, parked between 2 large rocks for cover, scanning the tree line through binoculars. There. She shouted. Southwest slope. Muzzle flash. I turned and fired a burst toward the ridge. Breyer returned fire with precision. This wasn't panicked shooting, this was a man trained to kill. We advanced slowly, bounding up the hill. Carver's men laid suppressing fire. Mike and I flanked wide. Breyer kept us pinned. Moving between trees, using smoke grenades for cover. He was trying to buy time. For what? That's when we heard it, a low, distant rumble. Rachel's voice cracked through the radio. Guys, he planted explosives on the clubhouse. Secondary charges. If the first failed, the second would finish the job. He's trying to destroy the rest of the evidence. I yelled. He has a remote trigger, Rachel warned. It's strapped to his vest. We pushed harder, desperate to close the gap before he could press the button. Mike crept to within 20 yards, ducking behind a boulder. I got eyes. He whispered. Vest. Camo jacket. Remote in his left hand. He's sweating. Panicked. Don't shoot the vest. Carver said. We need the detonator intact. Suddenly, a voice echoed across the ridge. Rachel's, Breyer. I'm right here. We all froze. She had wheeled herself out of cover, hands raised, facing him directly. You came to finish what you started? She called out. Do it. You already took my dog. Take me too. No. I screamed, heart leaping. Breyer stood, weapon aimed at her. He looked thinner now, pale, desperate. You don't get to talk to me. You ruined everything. Rachel took one slow roll forward. You're not a soldier anymore, Breyer. You're a coward with a grudge. His hand twitched, then, a shot rang out, but not from him. Mike had taken the shot, from behind the boulder. Breyer's left shoulder jerked as the remote flew from his hand, skittering across the ground. He spun and fired wildly, but it was over. Carver tackled him from the side. Officers swarmed, zip-tying his wrists and kicking the weapon away. I ran to Rachel, heart pounding. Are you insane? He needed a target, she said calmly. I gave him one that couldn't die. Paramedics treated Breyer on the spot. The detonator was secured and disabled. A second set of charges had, in fact, been planted at the clubhouse. Disarm teams got to them just in time. Back at headquarters, Breyer broke under pressure. He named names. 3 more HOA board members had been working with the Reese crew, approving payments to private contractors under the guise of maintenance costs. He gave up Reese's hideout, an abandoned hunting lodge just 2 counties over. Carver launched a raid for the next morning. Meanwhile, Rachel returned to the ruins of our home. She stood at the edge of Thor's old play area, tears in her eyes. I didn't get justice for me, she whispered. I did it for him. I placed a hand on her shoulder. We're not done yet. The morning air was thick with anticipation. Fog hugged the treetops as Carver's team assembled outside the abandoned hunting lodge Breyer had pointed them to. No flashy moves this time. This wasn't a show. This was about justice. Rachel and I sat in an unmarked van parked a mile from the lodge, monitoring the live drone feed on Carver's tablet. What we saw was damning. Multiple men moved about the property, armed and alert. One was Reese, president of the HOA, dressed in a flannel jacket, pacing by the back entrance with a phone glued to his ear. This isn't just corruption, Rachel said. This is a militia front. I count at least 9 armed suspects, Carver confirmed. We go silent. Breach from 2 angles, and secure the perimeter. No one leaves that place breathing unless they surrender. Mike cocked his rifle beside him. Let's end this. As the team moved out, my thoughts raced back to everything that brought us here. Thor's soft growl before he was shot, Rachel's trembling hands over his fur, the way Breyer smirked in court, and the broken trust of a neighborhood we once thought safe. Stay behind me if anything goes wrong, I told Rachel. You're not losing me, she replied. We do this together. The strike team moved fast. 2 flashbangs shattered the silence. Armed men scattered. One tried to run out the back but was instantly dropped by a stun round. Another reached for a weapon, only to be tackled by 2 officers and disarmed. Gunfire broke out near the west side, but it was short-lived. 1 suspect was wounded. The rest surrendered, hands raised. Inside the lodge, Carver found evidence beyond anything we expected. Stacked boxes of unregistered firearms, burner phones, cash-stuffed duffel bags, and files naming HOA residents who had filed complaints. They were building a list, Carver muttered. Planning retaliation. Rachel stared at the chalkboard covered in red marker circles and targets. Her name was circled 3 times, so was mine, and under it, Thor's name. In bold red letters, liability. A wave of grief and fury surged through me. I wanted to destroy everything in that room. But Rachel, ever the anchor, placed her hand on mine. We'll make them pay the right way, she said. With truth. Within days, the arrests made national news. HOA tied to extremist activity and targeted violence flashed across major headlines. Reporters surrounded our driveway. We didn't speak. Not yet. We waited until the full story was known, until indictments were unsealed and the community came to terms with the monsters they had elected to lead them. A month later, I stood behind Rachel as she gave a press statement on the courthouse steps. Thor wasn't just a dog, she began. He was my lifeline. My support. He helped me live with dignity. And they shot him to send a message. Reporters fell silent. We were targeted because we spoke up. Because we didn't fit the mold of their perfect little neighborhood. They hid behind bylaws and HOA policy while plotting violence. But the truth came out. And justice is here. She held up Thor's collar. This is what they took. But we took everything else back. Applause erupted from the crowd. Even the officers beside us wiped tears. Over the following weeks, HOA board members were convicted on federal racketeering and conspiracy charges. Reese, stripped of his title and convicted as the ringleader, faced 25 years without parole. Breyer was sentenced for attempted murder and conspiracy. He never looked us in the eye during sentencing. The neighborhood fell apart, board meetings suspended, residents divided, property values dropping. But none of that mattered to us anymore. We had rebuilt somewhere new, quiet, open land. No HOA, we adopted a new service dog, a golden retriever we named Valor. Gentle, loyal, and fiercely protective. Rachel cried when he nuzzled her for the first time. I'll never forget Thor, she said. But I won't live in fear. We built a memorial on our porch, Thor's collar, framed beside his favorite toy, and a photo of him guarding Rachel's wheelchair with his eyes sharp and alert. Every morning, I sit beside it with coffee, every night. Rachel wheels past and gives him a soft, good boy. Justice didn't bring Thor back, but it gave his loss meaning, and that meant everything. Hope you enjoyed this story. If it moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more gripping real-life inspired stories.